All right. Happy Wednesday. All right. So today we're talking about temptation. So, do you ever get tempted to give up and quit on your fitness, weight loss, health goals? Or maybe you're tempted to overeat like myself. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. Or maybe you're even tempted to skip a workout. Generally, that's not something I personally struggle with, but I know a lot of people do. Um, you know what? Let's move my face over here so it's out of the way. All right. So I'm sure at least everyone can say yes to all the above, even me at times. So my most recent temptation and battle has been my wife's Beth's chocolate chip cookies. They are, to put it lightly, they're divine. They're so good, and especially when they're right out of the oven and they're warm. It's like, granted, I've never had crack cocaine, but I imagine this is the powerful craving that one has when they first, try cocaine. In this case, these are maybe we should call these crack cookies. But anyway, some context. So normally when Beth makes these epic cookies, she makes a ton of dough. Okay, and she forms them into little balls, right? And then she gets the rest. So basically, she gets the rest and puts them in the freezer. So essentially, there's a whole bunch pre-made, um, and we can eat them whenever we want. Awesome. But the issue that was kicking my butt is Beth, and yes, I will blame Beth. Not really. Is we'd make as many as could fit on a cookie sheet. So like 12, 16, whatever it was. And I would be responsible and I would take, two. Um, the problem was is every stinking time I would pass them and there was still some left in the cookie sheet or resting and cooling, guess what would happen? I'd eat two more. And then I'd come back and I'd eat two more. And so over the course of, 4 or 5 hours, whatever it is, I've eaten I don't want to count, but probably 6 to 7, 8 cookies or whatever it is until they're gone. That is obviously not ideal. I was caving to temptation. My willpower was shot and I was acting on impulse. So how do I fix this problem and not alienate my family? Okay. This is what I proposed. All right. So instead of cooking as many cookies as would fit on the cooking sheet, okay, what I proposed was instead, how about we cook enough for one sitting? So essentially, two for me, two for Beth, two for Axel, Kenna, one for Riker, so on and so forth. That way, they'd be gone and out of sight, and we'd still have leftovers for the next time, but they would be tucked away in the freezer, okay, which kept them out of sight, which lowered my awareness that they exist, okay. They're harder to get to because they limit my proximity, and then three, it took effort, intentionality to make them. So I'd be very cognizant of what I was doing. And it wasn't like I could just grab them and eat them. Like, you have to preheat the oven and then you have to put them on the sheet and then you have to bake them for another 12, 13 minutes or what have you. So I was able to come up with this strategy because one, I was aware I had a problem, okay, and two, most importantly, I was focused on why I want to make better eating habits and just be generally healthy, fitter in general. And that's because I don't want to be a bleacher dad, okay. One of my biggest fears is turning into one of those big fat dads who sits in the stands or in the bleachers and yells and screams, and quote unquote knows it all. Not saying that's me, but I mean, that's what I envision when I see that when I characterize this individual, and I can barely go up and down the bleachers without oxygen. Okay, I don't want to be that person at all. Okay, so in short, I have an eternal perspective, focusing on the long term and not the short term satisfaction of slamming cookies every time I pass them. Okay, this kind of mindset is essential when it comes to changing your habits. Well, honestly, changing any habits really, especially when it comes to weight loss, working out, and eating right. Okay. So in 1 Timothy 6:12, it says, "Fight the good fight of faith, take hold of the eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses." All right. So obviously, Paul isn't talking to Timothy about fighting food temptation here, but the idea and the principle of having eternal perspective is the same. Okay. Take hold the eternal life. So basically, he's telling Timothy, remember why you are fighting and battling these temptations you are facing. Remember your why. Why are you doing this? And it's always easier to cave and give up into your old habits and way of life. Okay, it is always easier. So like me with the cookies, if But if you have an eternal perspective and focus on your why, you can come up with how you can combat and overcome your temptations and cravings. Okay. And so I'll put like in the message I send, I'll put a link to the Crush Your Cravings ebook I made a while back. Most of you have that, but if you haven't or you're new, I would strongly suggest you check it out. So if you're battling cravings, this should help you come up with ways that you can overcome them. So we all battle temptations. So what are some steps you can take to overcome them? I suggest you do the following. One, identify what your biggest temptation is. What's your biggest struggle, obstacle? Okay. Focus on one big issue at a time. Don't try to tackle all of them because generally you get overwhelmed and people fail. Two, when do you typically cave? For me, it was in the evenings. Okay. Which is pretty much universally true for almost everyone. Not everybody, but most. Three, why do you typically cave? What are the circumstances? For me, there's a whole plate of cookies. They're just sitting there. They're not going anywhere. They're looking me in the face, and I don't want to go to waste. I mean, not logical, but emotional. I talked about that the other day. My feelings dictated my actions, which dictated my identity when I should have had, this is my identity, this is my actions, this is how I should feel. Okay. Okay. Then once you've done that, one, how can you avoid some temptation? Keep it out of sight, make it harder to get. Come up with ways that you can avoid some temptation. How can you make it so that you don't have to be aware of it, cognizant of it? Generally speaking, you want to make sure it's out of sight at bare minimum. Two, you want to make it harder to get. And three, ideally, you want to make it difficult for yourself to make. Okay. That way, when you're going to have it, it creates a ton of intentionality. Okay. Two, how can you create awareness before you mindlessly dive in? All right. And I just kind of went over that actually just a minute ago. Three, what steps can you take to enjoy your favorite treat without going over the deep end? So, how can you regulate how much you consume of said treat? For me, it was just making sure I only had two. And if I ate another one of those people were going to kill me if I ate theirs. Okay. Um, Portion control. Instead of loading your plate up and just saying, I'm going to eat till I'm full or whatever, just make a smaller portion. Okay. Easy way to do this. It sounds silly, but is really to make, if you get a smaller plate or bowl, it really does limit how much you consume. Now, if you stink and pile on the same amount, it's not the same, but just limit your portions, make it smaller is an easy way you can do that. And psychologically speaking, if you have a smaller plate or bowl that you're using, that that just helps. Okay. Um, all right. So here are my personal go-tos. One, I do review the Crush Your Cravings ebook for ideas. Sometimes I forget the ideas that I had. Two, I ask God to help me resist said temptations. Three, I share my struggles with someone for accountability. Okay. And out of those three, I think the biggest mistake most people make is number three. They don't want to share their struggles with someone else and try to battle the temptation on their own. And like I say, this rarely works, and oftentimes it just creates more guilt and shame. But that is a topic for a different day. So I hope you guys have an awesome Epic Wednesday. Come Lake with Just You Fitness and Gursky Fitness, and send me a trainer. Go be awesome. Bye.